disgusting loner, who possesses an incredible power to heal any being, hell-bent on revenge against some enemies from his past life who made his life unbearable. He is ready to do anything to make them pay. Before this happened, Kiaru woke up from a bad nightmare some days to his birthday. He had heard a voice in his head telling him to get stronger, which he finds confusing. At that moment, a girl named Anna comes in, and when she sees how sweaty Kiaru is, she takes a napkin and attempts to clean his sweats off, but Kiaru declines her kind gestures and tells her that he would be fine. Anna notices how Kiaru is acting and asks him if he had the nightmare as usual, and he immediately confirms it, telling her that it is the same nightmare where he became a hero and fought with the demon lord. Anna smiles and reminds Kiaru of how he had told them he would be a hero who would save the entire village when he was young. However, Kiaru dismisses the topic and tells Anna that he has limitations, but she asks him the class he has his eyes on since he would soon become an adult. Hearing this, Kiaru tells her he would be happy with any great class he is chosen for, but he would not forget to repay Anna for her kindness for raising him as if he was her real son. Kiaru heads for the farm so as to go and harvest apples, but as he admires the apples they got from the harvest, he hears the voice in his head again telling him he should obtain the sight of the spirits, so that he would be able to have the sight into all creations. Kiaru becomes confused as the apple he is about to pluck begins to change its form into a type of red crystal. Suddenly, he begins to walk into the forest, and begins to wonder why he is not in control of his body as he does not know where he is heading to. On getting to a river, he stops, noticing the changes in the river, until suddenly a star spirit appears to him and asks what he wants, which he immediately tells that he wants to acquire the sight of the spirits. The star spirit commends him for what his ancestors had done to save her kind and moves closer to kiss one of Kiaru's eyes that changes form and makes Kiaru see the status of the spirits, which makes him fall suddenly on the ground and goes into a trance. In this flashback, the demon lord faces the Flare, Blade, and Bullied with Kiaru in the rear, watching as they all fight to defeat the demon lord, who defeats them and injures Flare. Flare falls down and Blade yells at Kiaru to heal her as they are all out of elixir. Blade adds that they kept him alive so that he would be able to heal them once they are injured. But hearing this, Kiaru smiles and sees his chance to free himself from their bullying and begins to walk towards Flare, as he tells them that he would not heal them because he has been waiting for the chance to defeat the demon lord himself. Eventually, Kiaru uses his healing magic, which has changed over time, to defeat the demon lord, and retrieves a jewel from the demon lord, after assuring him that he would start the world over again. Flare stands up and claps for Kiaru, who realizes that she has hidden an elixir and Bullied and Blade are dead. Kiaru tells Flare of his intention to start the world over again and assures her that he would have his revenge on her. Finally, Kiaru wakes up from a trance and remembers all that had happened in his past life. He regains his memories and remembers that he was a healer in his previous life, and he also recognizes the gift of the Falcon's Eye, which he collected from the Star Spirit. Then he begins to smile as he tells himself that his revenge has started, as he would make sure he destroys Flare, who had made his life a living hell in his previous life. On his birthday, Kiaru gets chosen as a hero, just like he was in his past life, and his status was a healer as well. And in order to plan his revenge well, he begins to eat narcotic plants so as to get resistance and tolerance to them, because he knows he would be turned into a drug addict. A few days later, Princess Flare, with the giant cannons on her chest and her soldiers, comes into the town, and they ask about a hero who has just been chosen. The whole town becomes happy that Kiaru is chosen as he follows Flare and her soldiers. On the way, Kiaru uses his Falcon's Eye to look at the strength level of the soldiers and realizes that the only strong person amongst the soldiers is the commander Leonard. Flare assures Kiaru on the way that she would teach him a lot of things as she is more experienced than he is. On getting to the imperial capital, Kiaru recounts the story of how the capital was made by trampling upon the demi-humans living there before and making them slaves, but then he flatters Flare by telling her how beautiful she is. In the palace, Kiaru sees the king's strength and decides that he would not have his revenge when the king is around. He also notices that Norn, who is Flare's younger sister, is also not around, which means he has nothing to be worried about when planning his revenge. The king sees Kiaru's status, and he gives him the title of the Hero of Recovery, just like he did in his previous life. After accepting the king's offer, Kiaru is asked to heal the kingdom's great swordsman, who had lost an arm in a battle. Later that night, While Kiaru lays on his bed thinking about how rough heroes have their lives, someone enters his room.
Wait a minute!
A maid walks into his room, moves closer to him, and immediately takes her clothes off. The maid begs Kiaru that they should have a plot together. This shocks Kiaru as he asks her what she is trying to do. The maid tells him not to be scared as she proceeds to give him a kiss on his lips. At that moment, Kiaru remembers that the people believe that if a common person works out with a hero, such person would go past their normal potential and get stronger. And he continues to have plot with the maids every night, while they all make happy noises, while at it, but Kiaru also gains more experience from them. Few days after continuing to work out with the maids and gaining experience from them, Kiaru meets the great swordsman Kureta as she has arrived at the castle. She kneels and tells Kiaru to heal her, which he did. But as he heals her, he is able to see through her memories, which makes Kiaru faint after healing her. Kureta becomes happy and thanks Kiaru, who is on the floor needing great help. When Kureta left, Flare tells the elder with her that Kiaru is useless to them as he is weak and instructs to make him stronger by any means possible, even if it is with drugs or brainwashing. Flare becomes disgusted and calls Kiaru a filthy cunt as she leaves, but unknown to her, Kiaru, who is now awake, is excited that she is the same as she was in his previous life, which would make him eager to have his revenge on her. Later on, Kiaru stays in his room and begins to act hysterical as he tells the elder and Flare that he would not use his healing magic anymore because of the awful things he would be seeing in other people's memories. Flare moves towards him and tries to persuade him to use his powers, but he disagrees, and after trying for a while, she tells him that she understands and she would not force him to do anything and leaves with the elder. Later, Kiaru recounts that he is reliving what had happened in his past life, and he also adds that he believed Flare was a good person in his previous life, which made him agree to use his powers then because he wanted to be useful to her. But now that he knows she is a bad person, he would not be deceived by her smile this time around. A maid enters Kiaru's room and brings in tea, which he asks why. The maid replies that the tea is a gift from Flare. Knowing that Flare has drugged the tea, Kiaru tells himself that he has to have courage in order to take the tea. After taking the tea, Kiaru becomes dizzy and finally falls down due to unconsciousness. Later, Kiaru wakes up and finds himself in a dungeon as he is being beaten by Leonard the commander, and when he asks Leonard what he had done wrong, Leonard tells him he had refused to heed to Flare. Kiaru falls down due to pain and tells Leonard he had given him 28 lashes, and he would never forget that. But as Leonard tries to hit him again, the elder tells him not to destroy Kiaru as he is his test subject. The elder then proceeds to give Kiaru some drugs and makes him addicted to it, but every night, he gets visitors that are sent in to him by Flare, and these visitors were heroes who wanted to get stronger. The females would come to work out with him, and the males too would also work out with him through his rice cakes. One night, Flare visits Kiaru in the prison and begins to maltreat him, and as she sees that he is going crazy as he has not been given drugs, she takes a bottle of drug and tells him to sit up to beg for it. She also treats him like a dog and kicks his mini sausage as she pours the drug on the floor and makes him lick it while using her feet to step on his head. From that day on, Kiaru is used to heal people in the day and gets violated in the night, and this continues every day, but Kiaru tells himself that he has prepared for it, and he knows that as soon as his tolerance for drugs goes up, he would awaken. 6 months later, Flare visits Kiaru, and she pours the drugs on the floor as usual, but as he finishes it, he becomes aggressive. When he moves closer to her, she gets scared and throws the bottle of the drug at his head, making him bleed. Kiaru stares at the broken pieces of the bottle, and he begins to regain himself as he remembers who he is and his target, Flare, who made life a living hell for him. As Flare leaves the prison, she tells the elder that she needs to get rid of her dress as Kiaru's stench is on it, and she cannot stand him. Kiaru stands up and checks his status, and when he sees that he has gotten stronger from the powers he has gotten by gaining experiences from the people he had healed, he tells himself he would make sure Flare pays for what she has done to him. Few days pass and Kiaru gets information from what he heard from the guards that the king has traveled to another country, which makes him decide to begin his revenge. Kiaru removes the chain in his neck with his powers and also breaks out of the prison, while he decides that he would make sure Flare begs him for death, while he has fun taking his revenge on her. Soon the guards begin to look for him, and Flare also wonders how Kiaru is able to escape from the prison with the state that he is in. Then, she becomes interrupted by Leonard, who drags Kiaru in as he announces that he has captured him. Kiaru tries to speak, but Leonard pushes his head on the floor and tells Flare that Kiaru had said something that they are not supposed to ignore, and it is something confidential. Flare instructs the other guards to lock Kiaru up, while she invites Leonard to her chambers to hear what Kiaru had told him. Leonard goes to Flare's chambers, and she teases him that it should be an honor for him to be able to enter her private chambers, which Leonard thanks her for. Then, when she asks him what Kiaru had told him, he immediately wields his sword and kills the two guards protecting Flare. Then he tells her that he had copied the technique from Korea when he healed her.
Wait a minute!
Flare becomes shocked and immediately asks Leonard who he is, but he ignores and suddenly grabs her melons and rips her clothes off, while she falls down, revealing her giant cannons. Leonard grabs Flare by her face and begins to take her powers, and when Flare asks him why he is doing that, Leonard's face changes completely to Kiaru's face, who tells her that her favorite dog has come to play with her. Flare asks about Leonard, and Kiaru tells her that he had exchanged their bodies and killed him for the 28 lashes he gave him. He adds that he has come to thank her for treating him like a dog and getting him addicted to drugs. Flare begins to beg Kiaru and tries to explain to him that she gave him the drugs for his own benefit, as he was fainting every time he used his powers. Kiaru recounts all what Flare has done for him, and he asks if that is her way of showing her kindness, but Flare becomes surprised that he remembered everything she had done to him. Kiaru immediately lifts Flare up by her neck and asks if she would play a game with him. Hearing this, she becomes confused as she wonders what Kiaru would do to her in order to get his revenge. While she continues to wonder what her fate would be, Kiaru takes one of her fingers and breaks it, causing her a lot of pain as she screams out loud, thinking someone would hear her voice and come to rescue her, but unknown to her, nobody is able to hear her scream. Kiaru tells her that she should be able to feel the guilt of everything she has done to him if her body gets messed up. Flare begins to beg Kiaru and offers him money, power, and women, but he ignores her and breaks another finger. Then, Kiaru tells her that he would break every finger on her hands, but if she is able to keep quiet while he breaks the fingers, she wins, but if she is not able to hold the pain in, he would win. Flare uses her other hand to cover her melons.
Did you pray today?
Flare begins to cry and tells him she would endure the pains, and he tells her he would be sure to keep his promises unlike her. Kiaru continues to break her fingers, and she also begins to hold in the pain without screaming, but she continues to weep profusely. Kiaru immediately tells Flare while breaking her fingers that she is trying hard, and he is proud of her. Then he heals her fingers, and it all goes back to how it was before. He tells her that he is lost, but when Flare thinks she is free, Kiaru tells her they would have to start again, but as she tries to struggle, he breaks one of her finger, which makes her scream, and he tells her that he has won.
Wait a minute!
Kiaru heals her again, and also makes her crippled. As she is not able to use her legs, he takes off her dress and drags her on the bed. Kiaru proceeds to remove his clothes, and when Flare tries to run, she notices that her legs are not working. Then he tells her that he has used his corruption healing on her, so that he would be able to violate her. Flare becomes scared and tells him that he cannot violate her as she is a princess, and she would not allow him. He slaps her, and he proceeds to put a rod inside the fireplace. Then he tells her that he would make her choose the kind of rod she would like to take between his own rod and the rod in the fire. She immediately tells him that she wants his own rod. Meanwhile, the hot rod has started to burn the room. Then Kiaru pulls Flare by the hair, and he tells her that she is a good toy and that he would erase her memories and change her face, but Flare begins to beg him not to do so. But he tells her he would give her a chance to restart her life once he changes her face and erase her memories. Kiaru changes her face and erases Flare's memories, which after she loses consciousness. Then Kiaru becomes excited as he feels good after his revenge on Flare. Kiaru escapes the palace with Flare, and he leaves a corpse with Flare's face, so as to make others believe that Flare is dead and also make it look like it was Leonard that killed her. While in an inn in the village, Kiaru looks at himself and he admires his body like charm. Then he begins to think of what to do next as he recounts that he would have his revenge on Bullied and Blade as well before he goes to meet the Demon Lord to know what she was trying to protect. While Kiaru decides that he needs to be strong so as not to be able to be defeated by anyone, Flare wakes up and begins to wonder who she is. Kiaru goes to meet her, and after he hugs her, he tells her that her name is Freya, and she is his attendant. He adds that she must have forgotten everything because she had collapsed due to a high fever. Then he tells her that they both love each other, and while he tells her this, he uses his magic to make her believe the new information he is telling her about the both of them. Flare believes that she is Freya and Kiaru, tells her that they should work out so that she would be able to remember. Then he also tells her that she should beg him like she always does, and after repeating the words he carefully chose to disregard her, they both work out. The following morning, Flare holds Kiaru's hands and tells him that she feels like he is a beloved person to her, even though she cannot remember him. She also asks for his name, and he tells her that his name is Kiarga. Then she stands up, and they hug with their bare bodies they rock. Flare then tells Kiaru that she loves his warmth and smell.
Oh my god! Wow!
At that moment, Kiaru begins to think of how he would redo his life as he has been reborn. He and Flare decide to leave the city for their personal safety, aiming to continue their journey that never existed. On their way out of the city, they see posters being placed for the search of Leonard, as he is accused of killing Princess Flare. Flare notices that Kiaru is smiling, and when she asks him why, he ignores her. As they are about to leave, one of the villagers tells another that they hope Princess Norn would return from her study abroad, so as to console the king. On hearing this, Flare begins to shiver, and Kiaru stops abruptly, and he begins to sweat. Kiaru remembered that Norn was the only person that recognized him, and since he had regained his senses, he did not want to have anything to do with her. In a nightmare, Kiaru recounts how he had seen Flare, Blade, and Bullet practice their magical skills, and Flare tells him to also learn how to fight, so that he would be able to contribute in their fights. Flare also tells Blade and Bullet how they have made Kiaru comfortable, because they are always doing despicable things to him. Then Bullet tells them not to say awful things to Kiaru, and they all laugh at Kiaru, who is in need of drugs. Later that night in Flare's tent, Kiaru is naked, and Flare teases him with a bottle of drug, and opens her floodgates, then pours the drug on it, while she instructs Kiaru to take his drugs. She also proceeds to torture him. Kiaru leaves Flare's tent, and on his way to go and sleep, Blade comes out of her own tent, and begins to beat Kiaru up for licking Flare, who she is interested in. Blade also decides to have a taste of Flare's floodgates by kissing Kiaru, which afterwards, she vomits and blames herself for kissing a man, but consoles herself that it is because of her love for Flare. After being violated by Blade, Kiaru enters his tent only to see rose petals everywhere. Then he suddenly hears Bullet's voice, telling him to come closer. Bullet begins to apologize to Kiaru for what Flare and Blade had done to him, then tells Kiaru that he is the only person who loves him, and he would try to make him happy. Bullet begins to work out with Kiaru through his rice cakes, and Kiaru becomes weak as Bullet yells at him that he is in love with him. Bullet hits Kiaru as he pleads that Kiaru should die for him, so that no one would be able to have him until Kiaru loses his consciousness. Kiaru suddenly wakes up from his nightmare, and Flare asks him why he has been yelling in his dream, but he tells her not to worry as he had a bad dream, but as she moves closer to him, he flips her over and tells her that he is happy that he had the dream as he is able to remember what he is supposed to do. After working out with Flare, Kiaru goes out of the tent to wash his face, and he decides that he would be sure to get his revenge on Blade and Bullet as well. Kiaru and Flare leave the imperial capital, and they get to a city called Lanarita, and on getting to the city, Kiaru tells Flare that the city is a free city filled with a lot of vices. They enter a place to eat, and as Flare is about to drink the water, Kiaru tells her that she should not drink it as the water is infected, and it is causing an illness in the city, but the villagers are not aware. Flare asks if she can eat the food, and he tells her that the poison in the food has vanished due to the heat used to cook it, but the water is poisonous. He tells Flare that the water has been contaminated by a monster carcass, and the people are in the early stage of its infection. Back in their room, Kiaru tells Flare that he is willing to help the city, and suddenly, he drinks the water.
Wait a minute!
And Flare asks him why he did so, and he replies her that he wants to create an antidote for the poison using some antibodies he would generate from his body. After making the antidote, Kiaru sees a merchant, and he tells Flare that the merchant would be good for a deal. Then he invites the merchant and his servant, so as to introduce the antidote to them. Kiaru tells the merchant to try the antidote, but instead the merchant gives his messenger, who immediately feels better after taking the antidote. After confirming his servant's health, the merchant named Ledra Goldman takes the antidote and also feels better. Kiaru sells them a box of the antidote by selling each piece for 1 gold coin, and he also makes a deal to allow Goldman to name the price of the next batch of antidote. He then proposes that he would take half of every profit Goldman makes off the antidote. Then after making a deal with Goldman, Kiaru and Flare leave with the money they made. On the way, Flare asks Kiaru why he did not sell the antidote himself, and he tells her that he does not want any trouble from people that would want to attack him because of the recipe. Flare asks where they are heading to, and he replies that he wants to buy something. Soon, they get to a slave market and Flare tries to persuade Kiaru that an explorer is better than a slave, but he explains his need for a slave and she agrees with him. Kiaru tells the owner that he wants to buy a combat slave, but after a series of slaves shown to Kiaru, he only takes interest in one slave that is said to be part of the wolf clan. The slave becomes aggressive and tries to attack Kiaru, but the owner immediately tames the slave by using a magical ring. Kiaru could feel the huge grudge in the kind of the slave, and he tells the owner that he is going to buy the slave, but the man tries to tell him as the slave is a reject that has been classified as a plot slave. Kiaru tells the owner that the slave is just like him, and he would buy her without any complaints in the future. Then he tells the slave that he knows she seeks revenge, and if she follows him, he would be able to help her get the revenge she desires. Kiaru takes the slave home, and after taking off her collar, Flare asks him if it is safe for him to do that, and he tells her that he is sure that the slave would listen to him, even if he takes it off. He also proceeds to heal the slave, and he is able to see that her village was attacked by the Imperial Army, who killed some of her people and also captured her in order to sell her into slavery. He explains her ordeal to Flare and also tells her that the slave is unable to become stronger than she already is. Just then, Flare begins to feel sorry for the slave, but Kiaru adds that the slave's name is Setsuna. Kiaru also tells Flare that Setsuna wants revenge on the army that took her away from her people. Then he adds that it is not a bad idea to make a princess kill her people, and when Flare asks him what he said, he tells her not to worry about it. Kiaru takes one of his potions, and he drinks it to give it to Setsuna through her mouth.
Wait a minute.
Seeing this, Flare becomes uncomfortable as she is not willing to share her master with anyone, but later that day, Flare and Kiaru goes out to sell another box of antidote to Goldman, and after collecting the money, Kiaru tells Flare on their way home that he is surprised as Goldman has not sent a mob to attack him for the recipe, and Flare also shows her excitement of them making more money and helping people in the process. On getting home, they notice that Setsuna has not woken up. Then, Kiaru tells her that she would wake up soon as she has recovered fully and gained her strength back. He takes the potion and tries to feed Setsuna as usual. Then Flare looks away, but as Kiaru gives Setsuna the antidote, she wakes up and slaps Kiaru hard. Setsuna yells at Kiaru that he is trying to take advantage of her, but Flare immediately yells at her that she has offended the person who helped her, and he was only trying to give her a potion. Flare begins to cry as she tells Setsuna that Kiaru is her master, and he had bought her and healed her. Then Setsuna realizes what she has done. Then she begins to apologize to Kiaru for reacting to him in such a manner. Kiaru begins to wonder why Flare has become so soft in another dimension. Therefore, he introduces himself to Setsuna, and he immediately instructs Flare to go and get them food since he wants to eat in his room. Flare becomes excited, and she tells them that she would take her time as she wants to get an extravagant food for them so as to celebrate Setsuna's recovery. After Flare has gone, Setsuna shows her appreciation to Kiaru and tells him that she has to leave. However, as she tries to attack Kiaru, he captures her and pins her down with her rice cakes. Then he proceeds to ask her why she thought he took off her slave collar, and she explains that he knows that he is much stronger than her, but she asks him who he is, and he tells her that he is an alchemist. He tells her all he knows about her clan and her weakness. Then he proposes to her that he would make her stronger if she is willing to do as he says, but he also adds that the only condition he has is for her to tell him her real name, which is engraved on her soul. Setsuna agrees, and Kiaru tells her that in order to make her stronger, he would have to use his abilities. She immediately tells him that she would do it. Then he begins to remove his clothes, and they both begin to work out. A few minutes later, Setsuna begins to tell Kiaru how she wants him to continue to make her stronger, and he tells her he would get her the revenge she desires. A few days later, Kiaru and the girls learn that the Imperial Army are going to attack the rest of the Wolf Clan, and they all go to a high mountain waiting for the army to strike the village. But as Setsuna sees the soldiers, she becomes angry, and as she tries to attack the soldiers, Kiaru holds her down and tells her that she should be calm as he would go and help her to clear the air before she attacks. The soldiers take out some of the villagers and begin to beat them. Then Kiaru wears a mask and goes into the village, announcing himself as the hero of the sword. But when the soldiers try to attack him, he begins to use Kura's sword abilities and kills most of them. While in the fight, he signals Flare, and she also uses her magic to take down some of the soldiers, and this makes Kiaru happy as the princess is taking down her beloved soldiers. Soon, he calls on Setsuna, who begins to take out the soldiers as well along with her clan members. Kiaru admires the new Flare for not having the same attitude she had before her memory was erased. After the battle, Flare sleeps in the tent dreaming and making happy noises as she calls on Kiaru's name, but Kiaru and Setsuna goes to the source of the illness of the people of Lanarita. Then he asks Setsuna if she wants the town to be cured or not, and she pleads with him to cure the land. After healing the water, the two begin to work out as Kiaru places Setsuna against a tree, and while at it, they both discuss how Setsuna felt when she was having her revenge. While talking, Setsuna makes happy noises and she tells Kiaru that she wants to be stronger, so she wants to have more workouts with him. After, Setsuna tells Kiaru her real name, and she gives her life to him as his humble servant. But after the workout, Setsuna sleeps and Kiaru decides to protect her with his life. And he also proceeds to recount his plans of having his revenge and healing the world. Meanwhile, at the imperial capital, the king meets Leonard, whose face was changed by Kiaru, and he tells Leonard, who now has Kiaru's former face, that he would give him a chance to redeem himself because of the trust Flare had in him. The king orders Leonard to capture Kiaru, and he becomes excited that he would be able to have his revenge on Kiaru for taking his body and changing his face. Meanwhile, in the palace at the imperial capital, Kureha walks in the compound and she overhears two guards talking about the incident that took place in Lanrita, how the said hero of the sword used her family's technique in sword wielding. Setsuna and Flare begin to play in the river, and they both take their bath as well. There, Kiaru watches them as they play in the water. He admires the two girls and also admires Setsuna's survival skills, as she is able to catch fishes for them to eat. He sees as Setsuna bends to catch the fishes, and he immediately takes off his clothes to join them, and asks her if she likes it that way. Being the sucker for sausages that she is, she states that she does not want him to stop, as she only prefers it when they are both alone. Kiaru persuades her that it is okay the way they are. Then he immediately calls Flare to join them, and the three of them begin to work out in the water. Later, the three set out, and while they walk through the city, Setsuna tells Kiaru that she does not want to be in those places, as it reminded her of how she was taken captive as a slave. Kiaru assures her that she would be fine as long as he is with her, and that would also be their last day in the city, as they have helped them to heal the source of their illness. As they walk past a man, he asks Kiaru if he is willing to sell Setsuna to him, but Kiaru tells him politely that she is not for sale, but the man tries to attack Kiaru for trying to be adamant, and Setsuna immediately pounces on the man. At that moment, Kiaru realizes that the man is one of the soldiers that have fled from the battle against the Wolf Clan. He tells the man that his reward is death, and he immediately instructs Setsuna to kill him. On getting to where they are supposed to meet Goldman, he asks them why they came to him late, and Kiaru replies that they had a minor issue on their way. Goldman immediately proposes a deal to Kiaru that he should sell the recipe to him, as he has other big merchants who are willing to pay a huge amount of money for the recipe.
Oh my god! Wow!
Kiaru refuses, and Goldman immediately calls some goons, and as they arrive, Kiaru tells Goldman that he is not willing to cause trouble and tells him he would give him the recipe. Kiaru gives him the recipe and they collect their money. On the way, Flare asks him why he gave out the recipe for the antidote, and he reveals that even with the recipe, they would never be able to make the antidote, as he used some antibodies that he generated in his body to make the antidote. Kiaru adds that Goldman has lost money because he gave the wrong antidote to him. But while they continue to walk, Kiaru suddenly senses danger and wields his sword, only to realize that he is being attacked by Kureha. Kureha accuses Kiaru of killing Flare and also brainwashing two girls in order for them to believe that he is a good hero. Kiaru tells her that she is not supposed to be his enemy, as she had promised him, but she tells him that she does not know who he is. Flare tries to use her magic to fight with Kureha, but she is defeated by the sword's master. Kiaru agrees to fight with Kureha, but he tells Setsuna and Flare to watch and learn from the fight they are about to witness. The two begin to fight, and after a while, Kiaru uses a technique and tries to make Kureha inhale an aphrodisiac, but as she sniffs it, she is able to force herself to restrain it by making a wound around her thigh by cutting it out. Kiaru becomes impressed and continues to fight with her. A few minutes later, Kiaru uses a special technique and cuts Kureha's arm off by showing her the pain of the Wolf Clan villagers and how they have suffered in the hands of the Imperial Army. Kureha loses her consciousness and they take her to their inn. When they get home, Kiaru heals Kureha and Setsuna tells him how she admires the way he fought with Kureha, which motivates him to tell her that she can be stronger than him, and also tells Flare that she would need to learn some combat skills from Setsuna. After their discussion, Kiaru asks Flare if she can put up a little show for him. But later, Kureha wakes up, and she becomes hysterical as she tells Kiaru that she does not believe everything he showed her. But Kiaru changes his face to his real face, and Kureha begins to ask him why he had killed Princess Flare, which he tells her that he did not kill Flare. Suddenly, Flare walks in dressed as her former self, and she explains to Kureha that Kiaru had helped her to escape when Leonard was trying to kill her. Flare explains to her what Kiaru had told her to say, and at the moment, Kiaru begins to feel excited as he tells himself that Flare had gotten the role perfectly, not because of her giant cannons, but because she is still the same Princess Flare. Flare leaves and Kureha begins to apologize to Kiaru for trying to kill him. Then she begins to feel uncomfortable as she tells him that she needs to make amends. She kisses Kiaru, and he immediately grabs her, but unknown to her, Kiaru had added an aphrodisiac on her. When he healed her, Kiaru and Kureha begin to work out, and she begins to make happy noises, but they do not know that Setsuna and Flare are at the entrance hearing what is going on in the room. On the other hand, Leonard has embarked on a journey to get his revenge on Kiaru, and he begins to laugh maniacally as he thinks of what he would do when he gets to his destination. The following morning, Kureha is unable to stay away from Kiaru, and this makes Setsuna and Flare unhappy. Kiaru tells Kureha that she should eat, as it is uncomfortable for him to eat his meal. They all suddenly hear a voice calling on Kiaru, and as they listen they peep to see that it is the guards from the imperial capital, and they announce to him that they have taken the people in his village as hostages, and for them to release the people, he has to come out of hiding. The guards tells the people in Lanrita that they should report back to the capital once they see Kiaru, but Kiaru becomes sad as he sees the people from his town. But he immediately instructs Kureha to help him get any information she can get from his people. But before she leaves, he gives her a deep kiss on her lips, and this makes Setsuna and Flare shocked that Kureha has joined them. Meanwhile, a guard takes the news back to Leonard that they are unable to find Kiaru. But Leonard gets angry as he tells that he is sure Kiaru is in Lanrita, as he keeps getting some signs in his body. He also adds that he is getting impatient as he cannot stand to see Kiaru's face every time he looks in the mirror. Later that day, Kureha tells Kiaru that his village has been taken as offenders because they are accused of having heretical beliefs. Kiaru tells them he knows it is Leonard's doing, and that makes him very sad and angry at the same time. Kiaru leaves for a walk, but when the girls ask him where he is going to, he tells them that he wants to go to Leonard, who wants to see him. Then he changes his face to the face of one of the guards in the Imperial Army before going out. On getting to town, he sees the members of his town, and when he is unable to see Anna, he begins to wonder if she is safe, but after checking for a while, he sees a guard and takes him to a corner to act like Murda, a member of the army. He tells the guard that he would deliver a message to Leonard on Kiaru's whereabouts. Kiaru also asks the guards about his people, and the guard tells him that Anna was violated by Leonard in front of the whole village after realizing that she had taken care of Kiaru when he was growing up. Kiaru becomes sad, and he begins to think of how Anna has been the only person who cared about him, but he pulls himself together and goes to see Leonard. On getting there, Leonard is unable to recognize him, but he suddenly changes his face, which shocks Leonard, and before he could draw his sword, he becomes weak and falls. Kiaru insults Leonard for being stupid as he knew he could change appearances. He also adds that he was burning a neurotoxin incense, and that is what has made him weak. Kiaru changes Leonard's face again, and he is able to see how Leonard violated Anna in front of the whole village and how she screamed for help thinking he was the one. Kiaru turned Leonard into a female, and when he wakes up, he tells him that he would make him suffer what he made Anna go through. When Leonard realizes that Kiaru is hurt, he begins to laugh at him, telling him how he enjoyed his plot with Anna.
Oh my god! Wow!
Hearing this, Kiaru shows Leonard the huge monsters that are going to work out with him. He informs Leonard that he does cruel things to people because he does not understand the pain they go through. As Leonard sees the monsters, he becomes scared, and he begins to beg Kiaru for mercy, but Kiaru ignores him and leaves him to be devoured by the monsters. Kiaru immediately runs to Leonard's chambers, and when he sees Anna from afar, she smiles at him, and he begins to run towards her, but by the time he gets closer to her, she suddenly dies. Heartbroken, Kiaru begins to cry as he tries to use his healing magic to revive her. However, he goes back home and Setsuna and Flare tells him that they can make his body warm so that he would not feel sad, which he agrees to. Kiaru begins to work out with the two ladies at the same time, but while plotting with them, he begins to cry, and when the girls ask him why, he tells them that he does not know if he would be able to cry as he had thought he was out of tears. On the other hand, Princess Norn returns from her studies abroad, and when she gets the news about Kiaru and Flare, she begins to laugh as she plays with her plot slave by kicking him while she is enjoying the way he is barking for her. Norn laments on how stupid Leonard is as she had given him an idea, but he misused it then. After thinking about what to do with the situation at hand, Norn decides that she would invite Blade to fish out Kiaru, even though she does not like him. The following morning, Kure gives a report to Kiaru that a date has been chosen for the execution of his people, and the execution would take place in the Colosseum, which only has 2 doors and a strong magic barrier. Kiaru tells the ladies his plan to go and rescue his people, but when Kureta tries to talk him out of it, he tells her that it is what they must do to heal the world. But before leaving, Kureha announces to Kiaru that Norn has returned, and she thinks Norn is a sweet person. Flare becomes chilly on hearing the name without knowing why, but Kiaru recounts how Norn had treated him in his previous life, because she knew he was lucid. Norn made sure Kiaru served her like he did with her elder sister Flare, but Kiaru decides that Norn is not his enemy, and if she is the one behind the strategy to capture his people, he would not spare her. On the day of the execution, the people were tied to poles, and the commander reads out their offenses, but he announces for the last time that Kiaru should come out of hiding if he does not want to see his people die. After waiting for some minutes, Kiaru stands up and changes to his real face, and he looks at the villagers who also become surprised, as they look at him like a tall and handsome demigod.